The sky at night is often littered with aircraft and, coupled with chance observations of passing overhead satellites, it is little wonder that inexperienced observers on the ground below are often confused. Sky watches, however, can assist in educating people to the busy environment above. But what should one take on a sky watch? How best to prepare? Here, Russel Callaghan teams with Birdsall, editor of UFO Magazine, to provide a few handy tips.
Sky watches can be great fun. So here's some practical guidelines to get the maximum enjoyment of what can be a pretty cold night out looking at the stars. And we hope other things as well. We're here on Otley Shevin, just outside of Ilkley. Although we have some light pollution in the area, we've not travelled many miles to give ourselves a fantastic view from horizon to horizon. Of course, it helps for those who are not used to sky watches to know exactly where the best place is to park your vehicle. Oh, and please try to avoid parking your vehicle by busy roads, especially at night. Those country lanes can be pretty hazardous. So, if you can't find a public spot to park your vehicle and you're looking at some private land, do get permission from the landowner or a farmer. As long as you do that, you shouldn't have too many problems. The last thing you need is an embattled farmer coming along and ushering you off in the middle of the night. Sound travels a great distance at night. The last thing householders or farmers want at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning is to hear the sound of a car radio blaring away. It can travel for miles. So please, keep noise to an absolute minimum. Another piece of safety information: don't wander off at night. It's important that you do not do that, simply because there are lots of hazards out in those fields. It's pitch black, you could fall over, sprain an ankle, and you've got problems. There are lots of essential items that you need to bring with you on a sky watch. One of those, most importantly of all, especially these days, is a mobile phone. But when you pitch your sky watch, at least make sure that you've got a good signal. It's pointless finding an ideal spot only to discover that your mobile doesn't work. Typical route map, even an A to Z. You don't have to travel many miles outside of a city's or a town's lights to get away from the pollution to find an ideal spot for a sky watch. So do take along a route map, especially handy if you're in an area that you're not too familiar with and you might get lost. Other things to take on board? Well, a pair of binoculars. 10 by 50 binoculars, just as good and a heck of a lot less expensive than some of the larger astronomical telescopes. These I've had for the best part of 15 years. They've stood me in good stead and they're ideal, especially at night. Another piece of essential equipment, a torch. Ideally, take 2 torches with you. If you have to go wandering off, especially to spend a penny, take the torch with you. The last thing you want to have happen is for that torch to go down, simply because you forgot to charge the batteries. Have some spare batteries handy just in case. If you're bringing along a camera, keep it in a camera case, especially if it starts to chuck it down late at night. I always like to bring along these. They're night vision binoculars. Now they're particularly good for looking at objects way up in the sky at distance, picking out strobe lights, navigational lights from what look curious lights in the sky at first, but through these you can pick out the strobes very, very easily. Indeed, we've had helicopters, police helicopters, flying over our region with the lights out, obviously monitoring somebody on the ground below. But when you put the night vision scopes on them, you can actually see the crew of the helicopter reflected by their instrument panels on board through night vision. They're expensive, but some of the handheld night vision sets that you can get these days are less than £200. It's always important when you're going on a sky watch to prepare for the elements, i.e. the weather. It can turn pretty treacherous at night. Tonight's not too bad. Temperatures hovering around about the mid-40s, but it's always nice to bring along something hot to drink. Have plenty of chocolate bars, especially if you're intending to stay out until the early hours. And one final piece of advice: I always recommend that youngsters do not come along on a Skywatch. Those round about 15 or 16, fine, that's handy, but if you're here to look at the night sky, to check out the stars, check out satellites, check out, we hope, something odd, something unusual, the last thing you need is to turn around and a 4 or 5 year old or a 10-year-old is no longer there to be seen. So that's very, very important. But wherever you go for your Skywatch, enjoy yourselves. That's the whole point of this exercise. Do take on board some of those guidelines and tips. Safety is absolutely paramount. How many should you take on board a Skywatch with you? Well, I always like to think that 4 or 5 carloads of people is ample, especially if you're looking at a narrow lay-by where you're hoping to pitch camp for the night. If you are travelling some distance away from home, make sure that everybody is familiar with where you're going to. And it always helps, just in case, to let somebody back home know where you're going to as well. And with that, have a great Skywatch, but a safe Skywatch as well.
Organising the Skywatch is one of those things that takes a little bit of planning. As we've already gone over the major points to remember about privacy and getting yourself organised. All that's fine, you can have all this wonderful equipment and go out there and hope to get some remarkable footage of something extremely unusual. But you need to get 1 or 2 things happy in your mind. It's like riding a bicycle, if you like. The equipment, your camera, the camera that you're using, or 1 or 2 or 3 cameras that you're using. On a Skywatch, you need to be confident with the equipment. I suppose the first real pointer is a tripod. You don't have to spend a fortune. Something like this, about 40, 50 pounds. Nice sturdy legs, spirit levels on the head there, that lets you make sure things are level, because if you get one of the legs in the wrong position, it might look fine in the viewfinder wherever you're filming, but as you pull back you'll be creating hills and troughs that aren't really there. So nice and level, check the bubbles, firm ground, and away you go. Zooming into distant objects, the tripod's an absolute must. You need to be firm. Doesn't matter how steady a hand you've got when you're holding the weight of a camera, just your body's movement through simply breathing will create all sorts of shakes and wobbles on the camera. So once again, stick with the tripod, get it firm, plenty of adjustment on the tripod. They've all got the bit that goes up and down, so get comfortable to your eye. If you're fortunate like us and you've got the little screen there, well, look, there we are. Me watching you, watching him, watching me sort of thing. If you've got the little viewfinder, then you can see that what you're filming is what you're getting. What you see on this screen is exactly what you're going to see on the TV when you get your footage home. So remember, the little black and white viewfinder, it's okay, but to get the real picture, this is a must. One thing to remember though, the viewfinder, it takes battery power out of the camera, so be prepared with batteries. If you've got a couple of batteries, make sure they're fully charged, know the limitations of your camera. The more you zoom, the more you have autofocus switched on. This all uses power, and those batteries will drain very, very quickly. Lithium-ion batteries are the modern standard now, sort of thing, and this little camera with the smallest battery that's available for it will give you an hour, reliable. You can buy bigger batteries. I've actually got one for this particular camera that, believe it or not, gives you 6 hours. Okay, it costs about £80, but one charge and you know you're going to be alright for all night with a Skywatch, so well worth remembering. Extra batteries. The other thing, get to know where your controls are on your camera. Most modern camcorders are all switches and buttons at the back. It's alright having tons of little gadgets. Again, it's knowing what these things do, and get comfortable before you actually get out there in the field, know what you're doing and what each of those buttons will do. Another tip that I'd like to share with you that I think is a vast improvement on some of the older models of camcorder. Autofocus, we switch that off always. Manual focus, use this ring. You can see in the viewfinder, you can see on the little 3-inch monitor that your image is in focus. But when you're filming distant, if you've got an object in the sky, quickly appears in the sky and you think, oh, what do we do now? Don't go fumbling for the focus. Sony, JVC and Canon are all fitting this little infinity button. Dead easy. Pull the switch down and that sets the lens at its distant setting. So anything basically will be in focus. The great achievements of modern times is, I don't know whether we can pick it up in the viewfinder, we'll let you see the footage as we go along as well, but something that's come along these days. In the distance there is our local pub. With the flick of a switch we have night shot, and all of a sudden details start coming into view that weren't there before. And we'll let you see the footage in reality during this actual piece, but as you can see, night shot, wow, what an improvement from basically nothing to being able to see almost in darkness. It's good, but it does have its limitations. Let's not forget, we might be filming distant objects, stars, planetary objects, whatever. The night shot's really a guide, but in essence it's alright for getting an idea of the background of the land where you are. If you're out in the countryside in the dark, it'll give you an idea where your horizon levels are, where the hills are. Stick with the normal lens, the normal settings on the camera, the manual settings. And the one that I like to keep referring people back to is exposure. That is something that you can control manually by hand. It's like opening and closing the iris on a 35mm camera. The wider the iris, the more light. The problem is, on a dark picture, on a dark night, the camera's automatic settings open wide and let every bit of light into the camera that's there. That doesn't necessarily work. If you take a look at this piece of footage, you can see we've been filming the moon. This is during the eclipse earlier on this year, the total lunar eclipse. By turning the f-stops down on the camera lens, then all of a sudden the detail of the surface of the moon becomes apparent. And what a difference. If we had the camera on automatic, all we see is the big white ball of light in the sky. Just to recap, get used to where the buttons are on the camera. Get used to where it stops, where it starts. Get used to what you see in the viewfinder when the thing's running. It's alright pointing and shooting your camera at an object in the sky and thinking you've got some marvellous footage and realising that it's been on pause for the last 2 minutes. Make sure you're aware that you know the camera's running, you know the noises it makes. Get a good tripod, get it steady, plenty batteries, plenty tapes, and the long and short of it, enjoy yourself. And good luck, because you never know, it might be your turn to catch something on camera next.
Skywatches need not necessarily take place during nighttime hours. Take, for example, this man, Peter Grant. Throughout most of last summer, Peter used a variety of camera lenses and filters to record the skies above his Manchester home in the north of England. Here are just a few sequences, gleaned from dozens of hours of footage, which Peter has kindly agreed to share among fellow UFO enthusiasts.